science fiction, the literature and the cinema of the fantastic. It's a sociologically based art form. It wants to get to the heart of human nature. And sometimes that reflects very well. And sometimes it's the opposite. Not our better angels, but our fouler demons. I was a science fiction nerd, as a youngster, and that made you a bit of an oddball. If you were reading Ray Bradbury and Arthur Clarke and Isaac Asimov and Harlan Ellison, that made you kind of a weirdo. The jocks would look at you and go, "You like that science fiction stuff, huh?" And like, "Yeah, I guess I do."
What is it? Where did it come from?
Somehow, the literary science fiction seldom made its way into the movies, which tended to look at science fiction as kind of a spectacle. Since I'm a child of the 50s, I saw most of my science fiction on television and in the movies.
I thought I'd seen everything. Just look at those cities.
When I was 10, I discovered Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. And that was really my sort of lifeline to other geeks.
I grew up in the 80s. As a kid in that era, my first introduction to science fiction was through Spielberg and George Lucas. They made science fiction so affable and so entertaining that it just was easy to jump on board.
Play the pipe tones.
If somebody was to ask me to define science fiction, I would probably say it's what we're living in.
We aren't dealing with ordinary machines here. These are highly complicated pieces of equipment. We don't know exactly how they work.
I think the literal definition of science fiction is a fictional story that extrapolates current scientific knowledge and brings it into the future, but sort of realistically extrapolates what could happen.
The Martians can conquer the Earth in 6 days.
Any story that contains elements that lie beyond the boundaries of what is currently possible in our reality.
It is an examination of humanity. Where have we been? Where are we going? What are the pitfalls? What are the dangers? It's a brilliant tool for looking inward as much as an art form. It tends to look outward, out toward the future, out toward the stars.
We interrupt this program to give you a bulletin just received from one of our naval units at sea. A large object traveling at supersonic speed is headed over the North Atlantic toward the east coast of the United States.
The Day the Earth Stood Still starts off like a lot of alien invasion science fiction movies. A flying saucer appears and it lands. And then, unlike a lot of science fiction movies, it then does nothing. It just sort of sits there. And finally, the military comes out and everybody comes out. And when the alien emerges, he's very benevolent. And it's humanity that makes the first mistake. He reaches into his pocket and he gets shot. Surprise.
I merely tell you that the future of your planet is at stake. I urge that you transmit that message to the nations of the Earth.
I will make that recommendation to the President.
The enemy in The Day the Earth Stood Still is really ourselves. And yet, he's also a threat to us as well.
It's almost fascistic in the fact that the alien comes down and threatens to wipe us out if we don't mend our ways.
Day the Earth Stood Still is fundamentally a retelling of the Jesus story.
What is it you want?
My name is Carpenter. I'm looking for a room.
Oh, I see. Are you an FBI man?
He comes to Earth to give us a message of peace and tell us we can treat each other better. And he has a rough time of it.
Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be waiting for your answer. The decision rests with you.
A few minutes from now, we may have the key to the stars. 1 million years of history are waiting for us in that ice.
The Thing from Another World is huge in sci-fi. It was really the first science fiction movie by an A-list producer, Howard Hawks. And it sort of legitimized the genre of sci-fi that the lower budget movies hadn't done.
It's just something of a funhouse ride of paranoia, where you get to exercise the fears of, oh, well, what if something shows up here that really doesn't like us or doesn't even care about us?
It sounds like, well, just as though you're describing some form of super carrot.
This carrot, as you call it, is constructed an aircraft capable of flying some millions of miles through space, propelled by a force as yet unknown to us.
An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
Shouldn't.
The alien is not necessarily portrayed as evil. If you look at it coldly, he's really just doing what he needs to do to survive. And what he needs to do to survive is he needs to take over. And these people are his food. And no matter how the scientist tries to explain to him that they don't hate him, they hate him. Let's face it, he's the thing.
It's not here for a good reason. It's here for a very bad reason. It wants to take over the Earth. The end of the movie is possibly the most famous part of the film, where it's not a happy ending. They say, like, you know, keep watching the skies, keep watching the skies.
Tell the world. Tell this to everybody wherever they are. Watch the skies everywhere.
What's also interesting is that The Thing from Another World and Day the Earth Stood Still were both made in 1951. And they represented two sides of the alien invasion coin. The aliens will come and they will be benevolent. The aliens will come and they will be malevolent. In 1982, The Thing was remade by John Carpenter. At the same time, Steven Spielberg made E.T. Once again, both films representing two sides of the same coin. The aliens are going to come and they will be lovely, and the aliens will come and they will be horrific. And it's funny that The Thing in both cases represented the flip side of that coin.
I think filmmakers have always been attracted to science fiction and to science fictional worlds, because as a director, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a world anyway.
The imagination can run wild. Abilities are limitless within the bounds of sci-fi, and that's got to be very appealing.
There's a lot of things that you can show that people haven't seen before. It's also a technical challenge, because very often you're asked to make real things that have not been real yet in the movies, and you try to overcome that. Unfortunately, some audiences sort of reject older films because they think, well, look, that doesn't look real. Well, it looked as real as they could make it real with the money that they had. The impact that these movies had is one of the reasons why this genre is still popular.
And that goes back to the first trip to the moon. It goes back to Fritz Lang and Metropolis, and those cityscapes are phenomenal. Things to come. You get to create worlds.
The thing about Forbidden Planet that was different for me was that I got to see it for free with Quaker Oats box tops. MGM did a promotion. If you bought enough Quaker's Oats, which meant you had to eat them, and saved the box tops, you could actually get into the screening of Forbidden Planet.
Captain and crew, now hear this. We are now entering the atmosphere of Altair 4. Oxygen content...
Just from a standpoint of production design and costume design and just premise, it's a really important film. It's interesting to watch it with modern eyes for a number of reasons. It's half a very forward-thinking, fascinating, smart movie, and half really clunky romance.
Just once more, do you mind?
Not at all.
From the forward-thinking part of it, we've got something that talks about the human subconscious and the dangers of the monsters that lurk within and suppressed feelings you don't even know you have, and it winds up being a really smart movie in so many ways.
Prepare your minds for a new scale of physical scientific values, gentlemen.
I love it for its, by contemporary eyes, for its failings as much as for what it succeeded in doing that still holds up so well.
This is no offense, but you are a robot, aren't you?
That is correct, sir. For your convenience, I am monitored to respond to the name Robbie.
Robbie the robot steals the show.
What is it you require this time, Miss Alta?
Robbie, I must have a new dress right away.
Robbie is the grandfather of all the great cinema robots and has an incredibly specific and memorable design. And he showed up on The Twilight Zone. He showed up in Lost in Space. He had sort of a weird career of his own.
Previous robots had been kind of clunky. They're just sort of metal tubes with blockheads. And this one was beautifully designed. Inside were a number of people who sometimes got fired for being drunk inside the costume.
Well, you low-living contraption, I ought to take a can opener to you.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
It did not occur to mankind that a swift fate might be hanging over us, or that from the blackness of outer space we were being scrutinized.
My mother was telling my brother and I that she and my dad stayed up late at night and watched this movie where a flying saucer came out of a hole in the ground and then a cobra came out of the flying saucer and attacked these men. And we're like, Mom's been drinking. You know, it sounded so surreal. And then when I saw it on television within a year, I was like, oh my God, she was right. This is exactly what happened. It was one of those things where the way it was described was so beyond my imagination.
Is that some kind of a flying machine?
No. Probably some form of magnetic flux like invisible legs.
This is amazing.
It was one of those movies that sort of defined a generation.
That's how the Martians, yes.
When George Powell decided to make the movie, he chose to not make it period, but to make it contemporary.
There's something moving!
Which fit it correctly into the general level of the communists are coming movies.
The Martians are coming this way. We must evacuate the city.
In the 50s, one of the things that united us all, us kids, was fear of the atom bomb. And we were a pretty paranoid generation. Every time an airplane flew over, we would tense up in class and wonder if there was going to be a whistle for the bomb drop, because we were so inured to seeing the footage and the scare films that they were running about how the communists were going to kill us.
And there is a flash, duck, and cover, and do it fast.
How we had to put our heads down and then we'd be okay when the atom bomb dropped.
I think sci-fi tapped into the paranoia, mainly fear of the atom bomb. I feel like that's what started it, because the first atom bomb was dropped on American soil.
It's like, well, what are the dangers of all these nuclear tests that we're doing? Where is that going to take us? The possibilities of science seemed endless. And then consequently, because of the war, because of the rockets, because of the bomb, also potentially vastly more dangerous.
Science fiction films, horror films, fantasy films, they have a tendency to mirror the anxieties of the era in which they were made.
Will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late!
The fear of the Red Menace, of spies coming in and changing our minds.
It's a malignant disease spreading through the whole country.
Enlisting our emotions and eliminating them and turning us into fundamentally automatons. That was a pretty potent fear at that time. And I think Body Snatchers really expresses it particularly well.
Danger! Go on, get out of here! You're endangered, flee!
The idea of losing yourself and being replaced is a scary idea.
What could be more terrifying than the threat of losing who you are, your very identity, what makes you you, and to have someone else come along and take that away from you and walk around as you and nobody knows.
People weren't what they said they were, and that paranoia feeds into a lot of really classic mid-century science fiction and horror, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers is the ultimate example in suburban paranoia.
Baby asleep yet, Sally?
Not yet, but she will be soon, and there'll be no more tears.
I think science fiction was kind of undervalued in the beginning years.
The general idea throughout culture back then was, oh, it's kid stuff, it's comic book stuff, it's, it can't be taken seriously. Which is why I so admire those storytellers who came along. They took it seriously and they wrote provocative, often controversial, adult-themed things. And I think it took a lot of courage to step out of the pulp fiction ghetto of what was selling at that time. And those filmmakers who made these gems along the way that said, it's not just kid stuff. This is actually one of the most vital adult art forms possible. The clash of what human beings experience as we go along is a fascinating subtext. Certainly in 2001, that's the core of that movie.
It's technically flawless. It's visually undeniable. To this day, the effects are impeccable. I mean, there's nothing in it looks like it's fake, still.
It's I would say the only movie that hasn't been rendered quaint in its effects by modern digital technology, which has taken special effects so far beyond what was imaginable even 20 years ago. In 2001, it looks like you're there. It really looks like you're seeing reality. That was a result of incredibly painstaking, very advanced work, and not a single computer to be had. It was all handcrafted.
Roger, you're 2013.
No one had ever taken the time and put the effort and the work and the dedication and the attention to detail into a science fiction movie as Stanley Kubrick did. He worked with NASA on creating realistic-looking spacecraft. He worked with IBM on creating a computer. So just the dedication to detail resulted in this vision of our future that was light years ahead of anything that had come before it.
2001 is a purely cinematic experience. It was a novel, but the novel was based on the screenplay. Kubrick and Arthur Clarke developed the story together, but the film is a visual experience. There are ginormous swaths of no dialogue, and you don't need dialogue. And the film is also a bit of a Rorschach test. The general story about man evolving beyond its current state, but there's a lot that's there for your interpretation. By design or happenstance, you're allowed to define what that movie is about to yourself. And I think that that's the true brilliance of it.
We're living in a science fictional world now. Every time you pull your smartphone out of your pocket and talk to your mom, and you can see her there, it's like Haywood Floyd in 2001 talking to his daughter.
Hello!
We can do this now. People take it so for granted that, okay, well, this is just the world we're in. We're living now in science fictional times. We're learning more about the universe around us day by day than we ever could have even imagined. Where does science fiction go from here if we're living in this science fiction world? How do we continue to examine humanity and human nature and the possibilities of the future? It becomes more and more challenging. It's amazing what some brilliant authors and storytellers have predicted that have come true. And it also sometimes amazes me how much we failed to predict that has come true.